Hi, good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's Alumni Makers Panel. Pratt Institute's Alumni Engagement Department is thrilled to be partnering with Made in NYC for this incredible event. I'm Rosemary O'Sullivan Fisher. I'm the Director of Development Events at Pratt, and I'm thrilled to be joining all of you today. As many of you know, Made in NYC is a Pratt Center for Community Development initiative that supports local manufacturers and makers by giving them marketing and branding resources, valuable skills building opportunities, and access to a supportive community of peers within the sector. This event is part of Made in NYC Week 2020. Made in NYC Week is an annual celebration of New York City's manufacturing and maker communities. This year's all virtual experience includes panels, webinars, demos, tastings, interviews, factory tours, and an exclusive online marketplace with uncommon goods. Someone who is often featured as a panelist herself, Pratt President Bronet. Bronet is president of Pratt Institute in New York City. An educator and leader at the forefront of interdisciplinary learning, Bronet previously served as senior vice president and provost at Illinois Institute of Technology, acting provost and dean of the School of Architecture and Allied Arts of the University of Oregon, and architecture professor, associate dean, and acting dean at RPI. Her extensively funded work on multidisciplinary design curricula, from architecture and engineering to dance and fine arts, coupled with her own action-based installations with internationally acclaimed artists, have been highly recognized. Bronet holds architecture and engineering professional degrees from McGill University. She received her graduate degree from Columbia University, and she was licensed in Quebec as an architect and has practiced in multiple award-winning offices in New York and Canada, including her own Montreal. Introducing Frances Bronet.
Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for having me here. And I'd like to take just a brief moment to thank the extraordinary sponsors for Made in NYC Week 2020. The New York City Council Square, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Uncommon Goods, Goldman Sachs, Cozen O'Connor, Greenpoint Manufacturing and Design Center, LISC, New York City, TD Bank, Verizon, City Point, Adafruit, Tap Room, Outsnapped, and Steady Goods. And now, without further ado, our fantastic alumni panelists this afternoon include Naomi Feuerstein, who graduated in sculpture in 2012, Rob Price, who graduated in industrial design in 2002, and Jeff Juan, who graduated as well in industrial design in 2014. Naomi, Rob, and Jeff, hi. I'd love for each one of you to introduce yourselves as we begin and for our guests. So we're going to start with Naomi.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Naomi. I'm an artist, craftsperson, and educator. I founded my company Overlook Woods in 2014. It's a woodworking design and build studio. I learned sculpture at Pratt Institute, and that's where I learned how to woodwork. I had to take a safety class, and that was it. We'll get into this in a little bit later. I have freelanced as a cabinet maker. I've done freelance design. I bopped around a little bit. And through my work at Overlook Woods, I've worked with Madewell, House, and Renegade Craft Fair, and my work has been featured in Martha Stewart Living and an advertisement for Mott's. In a departure from manufacturing, I spent the past 2 years as an educator teaching woodworking at an elementary school. And now I'm trying to bring that education into my practice as a maker. And I believe in sharing back what I learned. I learned a lot at Pratt. I learned a lot from my teacher, so I want to give back to the community of creatives, and that's me.
And we are very happy about that. Rob.
Hi, Frances. Thank you. So I've spent my career growing global brands and designing products to improve people's everyday lives. Most recently, I've been in the fashion space and a senior design director for Michael Kors and also Coach, where I led their teams and really led a fantastic group of creatives build up those brands in certain areas. Additionally, I've been recently focusing on working with a number of startups and companies and doing innovative solutions and building sustainable strategies and playing with innovative technologies in terms of design and branding for companies. I live in Brooklyn and have 2 little kids. And yeah, as you had said earlier, I graduated from Pratt in 2002 for industrial design.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jeff Juan.
Hi, so I'm a designer based in New York right now. I'm from Mauritius and went to Pratt, as you mentioned, to do industrial design. While at Pratt, I did intern at some brands such as like Diesel, DKNY, Kenneth Cole, Michael Kors, and ended up at Coach, where I did accessories for them. And after that, I launched my own brand 2 years ago. And we're currently manufacturing in New York and Italy. And I also consult for other brands. Yeah.
Well, of course, the first thing I want to say is we are so proud of you all. Let me just say that as it's just great to have you here and to understand what you're doing. And thank you for being here. So I'm going to ask you some questions. We'll go around the room. And so we'll start. And some of you already mentioned this. I'd just love to hear more of it, probably because we'd love to hear about Pratt. And and I guess the question is, how did your time at Pratt be part of how you developed your own, your passion in the industry and the field? And we'll start with Jeff, who I see your products right behind you, so you can always allude to them.
So I think Pratt has like a very strong foundation year for like most of the majors there. And that's what I enjoy, like experiencing different kinds of design. And studying industrial design gave me like so many opportunities to explore different aspects, such as like tabletop or furniture, accessories and footwear. And I think that's where I got my foot into the fashion industry.
And how about you, Naomi? Because you didn't start in making furniture. No.
No, I did not. I started, before I went to Pratt, I thought I'd be a fashion designer. My grandfather was a fashion designer and had a warehouse and manufacturing in the garment district back in like the 50s and the 60s. So I was like, that's what I want to do. Then I got to Pratt and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Foundation, what do I do? I'm fine arts. And then through sculpture is how I got into woodworking. The sculpture sophomore studio, you had to go through the wood shop to get in. You had to take the wood shop safety course, and the woman who ran the wood shop at the time was Rainey Lehrman, who's still a friend, still a mentor of mine. And she's just an amazing teacher, amazing person, and got me so inspired by this material. And I found that wood was my Goldilocks. I tried out ceramics and it was too soft. I tried out metal and it was too hard. And wood was just right. And so it was challenging trying to bridge the gap between what I was doing as a fine artist and doing as a woodworker. And through the years, I've kind of figured out a way to combine both of those interests and those passions.
So it's interesting, some of these questions are going to come just really out of what you're saying. And it doesn't sound like everybody knew exactly where they were going to go or imagined yourself. Although I have to say, you're also young that like, I'm going to call you in 20 more years and ask you again, is this where you imagined you would be? And we would, so 2040, expect a call. I will not necessarily be in this seat, but so what did you imagine yourself doing? And are you where you thought you would be? So Rob, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so going to Pratt and really graduating from industrial design, I had such a aspiration to do furniture and this idea of designing, Mies van der Rohe and these kind of epic Eames type furniture pieces, and was fortunate enough after I graduated to work in the housewares industry and designed a number of kitchen products and things in that space, and my career evolved into designing travel pieces and luggage, and from there designing bags and handbags, and really got into the fashion industry. But what Pratt really set me up to do and allowed me to be successful in this journey was that while in school, I was able to creatively collaborate with the people within my own major, but then also with other majors outside, and just to be adjacent to the multidisciplinary approach of Pratt, and that creative collaboration was just so like foundational, and allowed me, as my career has pivoted into these unique aspects, to really to bring that same creative problem-solving approach into these different industries and different mediums. And I think that is just a testament to Pratt and the industrial design program as well, but just the nature of that holistic approach to creativity.
And Naomi, it sounds like you had a similar kind of exploration.
Yeah. What I loved about being a Pratt student was you just had access to so many different workshop spaces, techniques. Part of the degree as a fine art major is that you have to take a bunch of different types of making. You have to learn how to do 2 different types of printmaking, 2 different, technical classes. So you're in this system with other creative people who maybe this is what they know they want to do, and you're just kind of dabbling. And so through that, you learn like, oh, this is really for me, and this person's super into it, and now I'm super into it. Or you're like, oh, I tried it and it's not for me, but I see that person. And as I go through life, if I need a ceramicist to help me out with something, now I know someone. So you make these connections that you may not know you're going to want later on, but you probably will.
And how about you, Jeff?
I always thought I would do transportation design when I went to Pratt, because I love traveling and just like going through like different modes of transportation, whether it was like an airplane or a train. I always thought I would do that. And while at Pratt, I just tried so many things such as tabletop and furniture. And I was a huge consumer of fashion too. And for the love of fashion, I did intern at Diesel doing visual merchandising and some furniture renderings for them. And that's how I really like got into the fashion industry. Like furniture at Diesel led into footwear at DKNY. And now I have my own line, which I never thought it would happen that way, but just like one thing led to the other, and here we are.
So what happened to transportation?
Well, I would consume it instead of designing for it.
Great. And so now you are all involved with Made in New York City. And so what's the connection? How has it worked for you? What does it do for you right now? And why don't we start with you, Naomi?
So I've been a Made in NYC member for a few years, and I've taken advantage of some of the wonderful things that they offer. I did a photo session with a student. I've done some workshops. I was involved in a fundraiser event, and just being part of the community has been really valuable. If I need something and I have a resource of a list of different manufacturers in New York City that I can go to, where if I need some metal fabrication, I have a list of people that I can call and I would trust. And I have a job that I'm working on right now with a big client. It's, my biggest client yet. And they found me through Made in NYC. So that's a really exciting part of, just being part of an organization and being part of a community.
So Rob, you and Jeff are actually relatively new to Made in New York City, or Made in NYC. Sorry, I'm Canadian. What can I tell you? So Rob, how is it good for you? Interesting? What's it doing for you?
Yeah, it's been really fantastic connecting with the teams at Made in NYC, and really like what's happening right now is a true design renaissance that's coming out of COVID, and there's such a collaborative network of creators and that are all kind of working together and helping each other, and I've really been drawn to a lot of these different communities, and have been excited to connect with Made in NYC because there's just some fantastic programs and initiatives that they're doing, like this Made in NYC week. And I really think that this platform and this vehicle of connecting these manufacturers with these creatives is just so important. And I coined this term creative currency, but I think between all these different individuals that are doing these similar kind of parallel explorations, you could share each other's creative assets and kind of build off one another, kind of to what Naomi was saying. And I think it's just wonderful that there's a platform for that.
And Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I think New York has such a strong network of manufacturers, whether you're in like leather goods, garments, or multidisciplinary design. And as big as New York seems, I think it's such like a small city of like manufacturers that you can easily connect with. And if you know someone, you can pretty much find your whole supply chain by just talking to one vendor, and they'll lead you to one another. So I'm excited to be part of that and explore more manufacturers across the city and collaborate with more local artisans. Yeah.
I love that you're all talking about collaboration, about meeting this other network. I mean, one of the sadnesses, right, in America in this very moment was that we weren't prepared for certain kinds of manufacturing, and having this amazing, both your own skill sets, but also your commitment to each other and building this community is so critical, because you'll also see where the strengths are and perhaps even the challenges and absences, so that what else has to be in the network to make it even more robust. Of course, I have no doubts, because you're all so young, that sustainability was part of your practice even when you were students. And it was, even thinking about ecosystems, you talked about a little bit about even supply chains. Is there something that you think about with respect to sustainability, ecosystems in your own work? Rob?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question, and I think there's so many facets to it. I think one thing is creating products and items that actually are sustainable, that stand the test of time, and I think that comes back to good design and design thinking, and are those things going to be timeless items? So I think there's that element of sustainability, and especially talking about sort of the local manufacturing and the crafts and the artisan aspect. I think all of that kind of builds into this sort of sustainable products. But then I think there's this other aspect of upcycling, circular economy, working with recycled materials, and there's just some incredible things happening in that space. And I'm working on a project now that's using some 3D and AR, VR technologies to upcycle materials in a really unique and modern way. And I think technology plus some of these more agile forms of manufacturing plus this awareness of sustainability is so important, and it's definitely something that's affecting my work currently.
Jeff, how about you?
I think especially like manufacturing in New York, I think it's anything but easy, and often and most of the time the raw materials have to be imported or sourced from like different countries. And that makes you like think, I think, of the product itself and the packaging that goes into it, of how much do you actually need and what is considered luxury. And I think in that case, like less is more. Yeah.
Naomi?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about what Jeff said about packaging and start with there and then work my way back. But part of what I do with what is minimal packaging. As minimal materials as possible. I do a lot of work with reclaimed or upcycled material. I work in a shop that has a bunch of furniture makers and cabinet makers. So once wood gets down to a certain size for them, it's garbage. And for me, I'm like, well, no, that's not garbage. That's 2 spoons, or that's half a cutting board, or that's whatever. So taking things that would be going to a landfill and preventing them from ever getting there and turning something beautiful from just a piece of wood. And so that's a lot of what I do. I also I coined this term a couple years ago, and I never really pushed it, but park to table, where I take wood from New York City parks and I turn them into different home goods, kind of a la the farm to table movement. So just, I'm always aware of, what am I making? Does it have value? Is it a timeless design, like Rob was saying earlier? And how can I do it with the least amount of waste? And how can I use waste to create something new?
These are all amazing. I love the way you define sustainability as well. So now we're going to move into something completely different, which is, and I think, Naomi, you've already addressed a little bit about it, your greatest achievement and your biggest career challenge.
So,
yeah, Naomi.
You keep going ahead, Francis. Sounds like
I'm done. I'm ready for you.
All right. So we were talking yesterday, and basically my biggest accomplishment is still being here. I've been in business since 2014. It's been a slow but steady process. I've had other jobs. I was a teacher for 2 years. So just being here, not giving up in the middle of COVID. My teaching job ended in June, and I was like, I'm going for Overlook Woods full force. So just doing that, to me, is my biggest accomplishment, and also my biggest career challenge, is just being in the game. New York City is not an easy place to run a business. It is expensive. It is fierce. There's a lot of competition. And so you have to really just want it and really give yourself into it. And so just having that mindset is a big challenge.
How about you, Jeff?
I think starting my line has to be one of my greatest accomplishments. It's anything but easy to do it in New York, especially like starting in New York. And I think like being featured in magazines such as Glamour, Marie Claire during our first year, that's pretty big, and winning some awards for the lunchbox, which is kind of our staple now for the brand. And the biggest challenge has to be like keeping up the business, because as Naomi said, like you have to keep generating cash flow, whether it's from the business or other sources of income, like which right now it's a challenge, but it's how much like you want it to succeed and how much work you're willing to put into it. I'm designing for consulting and designing for the brands right now. I'm doing personal training on the side, starting a new business with another partner. So I think it's how much you want it. And I think that's the biggest challenge right now.
So, and Rob, for you?
Well, I'm fortunate to have had a long career of working and designing incredible products across multiple industries. I could go into most people's kitchens and find products I've designed in their drawers, or I can go into any airport and definitely see products I've designed. And riding the subway in New York City, it's definitely like a gallery of seeing products I've designed as well. So I'm really grateful for all the products that I've worked on and created and see people using in an everyday setting and engaging with them. And for creating and building up some of these brands that I've worked for. In terms of challenges, I would say right now, what's happening with this and COVID, how it's affecting multiple industries, especially fashion, I would say is an incredibly challenging time, but I am extremely optimistic that some incredible opportunities will come out of this and really allow people to bring a creative point of view to reimagining a new future.
So I'm going to throw out another question, which connected to the challenges. One of the things that we realize is that we make incredible mistakes, things that, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And we know that the mistake is not the issue, because that's actually, as designers, we're iterators. We go through those mistakes, and the issue is, how do you come out of them? And what did you learn? What were the lessons? And how do you recover? And do you always recover? So I'm going to ask you just to think for a second. I can talk in the meantime while the clock is going ding, ding, of something where you just walked into something that was really either problematic or you created a problem, and how did you actually come out of it, and what happened? And I'll let any of you start who's ready to sort of respond. Rob, go for it.
No, I think this goes back to creativity, and as designers or thought leaders and creators, there's this philosophy of taking problems large and small and approaching it in a unique way that comes at from another perspective or another way of looking at it. And that approach and that philosophy sometimes is used exclusively within people's crafts or industry, but it's a way of looking at anything. And that practice can be applied to whether you're an accountant, whether you're, like Naomi and Jeff, like doing these incredible lines on their own, whether you're working in an organization, or whether you're facing these challenges, approaching anything with a creative and, kind of problem solving approach, I think is just a tremendous skill. And I've always leaned on that when I face tough times and challenges. And like you said, Frances, really just iterating and learning from all of those challenges or mistakes and using it as a benchmark to grow and evolve from.
Naomi?
Yeah, I love what you just said, Rob. I'm always thinking about how my degree at Pratt was a degree in problem solving. When people say, "What did you study?" I'm like, I learned how to think critically and solve problems. The rest was, like learning how to make different things. But with setbacks, I think a big thing is having mentors or people that you can turn to say, like, I'm out of my league here, help me out. Like there was a door project that I had a couple years ago where it was just like 8-quarter, which is 2-inch thick, solid oak, really heavy. The tools that I have in my space don't accommodate the length of material that I was trying to process. And I was trying to clean off an edge. And one of the people in the shop was like, "Oh, why don't you do this?" And so instead of me just racking my brain and trying and not being able to find the information that I need, or even going on the internet, use your resources, use the people that you know, use the community, and also build that community so you have something to fall back onto when you do stumble or you do fall.
Jeff?
I would agree on that. Like definitely like reaching out to your resource, and also just knowing your ability to design or be a creative thinker, and knowing what you can and can't do, especially what you can't do, like when you reach at a point where it's time to move away from a design project, a job, or anything. I think it's knowing where to stop and take that and reflect on it and move on. I think like moving on is hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will help down the road. Yeah.
So I'm supposed to leave enough time for the audience to ask questions, but I have one more question of you, which is, the kind of classic end certainly for a president or somebody who is so proud of you. And what advice would you give to Pratt students, Pratt alumni, the community at large, on what steps to take, what guidance you have for them to basically move into the arenas that you have? So Jeff, I'm going to ask you to start.
Based on my experience, I would say definitely like try to find internships while you're at Pratt, or even after your degree, learning from where you want to go, like whether it's big corporations or other small business. I think like there's so much to learn from other people before you start your own business or get up to that manager level. Just like getting a network out there and building your experience from other people, I would highly recommend that, because having your own business is anything but easy. And the bigger the network you have to like call people after and be like, "Hey, how do we get this done?" or "How do we get that done?" I think that would be my advice, is to really get your foot out there before you jump into your own.
Rob?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Jeff said, really the Pratt community and the network and the friends that you make there are so important. Over the last week, I've had a couple calls with with people I went to school with, and just even being here with Jeff, who we didn't graduate at the same year. But I think the creative network and community in school really foster that and connect with those people, not just in your own major, but the other majors, because everything kind of intertwines, and it's a small world and small industries, and those relationships are really important, and they help lead to new opportunities.
And Naomi.
I'm going to say what they both, Jeff and Rob, they got it on the nail. But for current students, take as many classes as you can. Take anything that you think you might be interested in it. Take it now, because as you get older and you're not in the school setting, you don't have a wood shop, a metal shop, a ceramic studio, 4 different kinds of print studios, a CNC plastic studio. You don't have that. Maybe when you graduate, you'll be able to afford 1 or 2. So try as much as you can as a student, so that you know as you progress through your career what interests you. And if you do decide to pursue your own business, you can kind of zero in on like, okay, I'm looking for wood shop space, or I'm looking for bench space in a metal shop, and being able to know what you want. And also stay in touch, not just with your peers, but with your teachers, because your teachers have even more experience than your peers do, or even the people who graduate a couple years before. And if you can create relationships with your professors and with the faculty, they can be lifelong as well.
So it's really, really extraordinary what you've accomplished. And again, we're so delighted that you're here and that you're willing to share the expertise that you have. The chat has opened and questions are coming in. So I'm going to open them up. And Kelly asks, I'm looking at starting my own business in the communications design world. Do any of the panelists have advice for the first phase of starting up? How do you even promote yourself? I think, Jeff, you started with, I want one of those bags. That's clear. So why don't we, anybody just jump in, put your little hand up, and we can start. How do you promote yourself? How do you begin?
I think before like the brand exists itself, like promoting yourself is something that I try to do before launching the brand, just by going to like fashion events, meeting some influencers. From some influencers, I met my PR agency. So making connections out there. So going to events, whether it's at work or social events, that's where I found most of my partners. And actually my creative team, I work with people from Pratt. So every people I work with right now is definitely like somebody either I went to Pratt with, or I work at Coach, or like any other brands, and people I meet now like at events. Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah, I think it's important to practice what you want to do. And I think sometimes when you're starting out, you have to find either some pro bono work, or to just do some of your own projects to really start to define, for example, Kelly had asked about communications, and I think that's a great place to really start to work with friends that have bands, or maybe there's a local politician that needs a logo. I think there's a lot of pro bono work that could be done, and just reaching out to people and kind of opening up to your network, like, hey, I want to kind of hone in on this skill and kind of do that. Then I think the paid work will start to come in after you have some examples and trials of that.
Naomi, how did you begin? What would you recommend?
Get a couple tools and space and go for it. No, but in all seriousness, really just like knowing the tools that you actually need. Like, is there software that you need to buy? And starting with the minimal that you actually need, not saying, well, I want this camera and I want that lens, or I want whatever it is that you need for your industry. So starting with the bare minimum and figuring out a business plan. And as artists and creatives, I think that's the most challenging part of running a business, is running the business side of it. So set up a meeting with business advisor and kind of nail down like what your life costs, what you need to make money to live the life that your life costs, and think about how your company and what you offer can create the lifestyle that you want.
So Colette asks, you all have such a wide range of products and projects that you've worked on. What was your favorite? Well, Jeff, we know what your favorite is. Just
Well, some version right there. It has to be the lunchbox. I think it's actually the original lunchbox was my senior project at Pratt, which some people have seen my portfolio before, but and that's something that I kept working on years after years, and like 10 years later now it's on the market. I think that has to be one of my favorite that I worked on it for a couple of years. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I love that it came out of your student work, because that's actually, we hear that a lot. Projects, in fact, we have entire programs that emerged out of students' work, like the Pratt Center itself. Rob, a favorite project?
It's hard to pin down an individual project, but I love seeing the span of like a product category and walking into a store and just seeing the full range of every little detail adding up to this gestalt of a bigger message. So, some of the work at Coach and even at Michael Kors, it's been able to see that in the store. It's just incredible. It's a great feeling.
Naomi?
For me, it's anytime I get to bend wood, like anytime where I can make wood bend, curve, do things that wood normally doesn't do, or you wouldn't think that wood would do. And I learned how to do that at Pratt. I worked on a piece on independent study on a table that it's in my parents' house. I call it that they're the gallery. And whenever people go over to their house, they're like, oh, who made that table? And I'm so like, that's something I made when I was, 21. And it's still one of the pieces I'm most proud of.
That's great. So let me ask you another question is, how has COVID affected your practice?
I'd be happy to start with that.
Sure.
So my teaching job ended in June, and I had, this kind of resource of income coming through until then. And then now I have this time, and I've never not had a separate source of income. I've always been doing something and doing Overlook Woods. And so COVID has actually been the gift of time. Mm-hmm. So it's given me this opportunity to kind of take a step back and think and reevaluate, what do I want to be doing now? What do I want to be doing in 5 years? And I've never had the time, really just the time and the resource to just look and think. So that's what COVID has allowed me to do.
Yeah.
I would follow the time aspect of that. I think COVID did give us more time. I mean, as far as the brand itself, it just like makes you think of how much you actually need and like reducing some process and steps along the way. But I think with time, it gave me more time to like think about what I want to do, which is like more design, which I'm doing more now. And I'm also launching another brand with one of my PR partners, and we're going to introduce candles soon. So it just like gave me more time to design, definitely.
And what about the relationship to in-person and e-commerce? How does that impact your own work? We're seeing people change the way that they consume, what they buy, how they buy. How has that impacted you? Or what are you seeing even beyond yourself?
I could jump in.
Sure.
Definitely retail in general has been massively affected. And I think we all have leaned more into this online shopping, but I do think there's a real disconnect, and I'm seeing that as kind of a future opportunity is how do you start to bridge that experience that you would get from going into a store or to some environment that really excites you, and you get that shopping experience of finding things. And how do you then kind of do that in really unique ways? And I think it's going to force the brick and mortar companies to really create more enjoyable experiences, and it's going to force the e-commerce channels to really start to expand to the next level, and what is that in between, because they definitely feel, both of them feel like there's some room for improvement.
Well, let me ask you, and this is going to be a really big leap. If you think about your education and this moment in time, we would say in the academic arena that this is the very moment that so many things are shifting, whether it's the technological platforms, the ways of making. What does immersive learning look like when you may not be on a campus, but you could perhaps be in a fabrication lab in your hometown, or actually working with any one of you in your manufacturing place? Let's assume people like you are distributed all over the world doing this work. Can you shepherd our students? Can I just send, let's say one of you is in Ohio and one of you is in, doesn't really, Kyoto, and I say, you know what, you don't have to make it here to Pratt. I'm going to put you in a lab, which is with one of our alumni working on their work, because you might not be able to travel. What does that look like for you? And could we imagine some magical things emerging that we didn't even think about before COVID?
I think just by hearing you mentioning it, I think it gets me very excited, because having the ambition and the ideas that you have as a student, which is like no money is worth it, or like you don't have a budget really when you think about like school projects, and just as working with a business that's all about cost and putting a margin behind it. So I think like merging those two right away could be something very exciting. And for the student themselves to get that real hands-on experience I think it would be more than getting from an internship, because it's spending a bit more time and one-on-one time with the designer themselves or the team that they're working with. I think that's something that excites me definitely, and I think that's something great could come out of that.
So does that mean I just got a commitment for someone to be working with you? I think I heard that.
Would take one person.
Yeah, I think there's new models emerging that we're starting to see. And one of the things we encourage everybody is, how do you get involved right now as things really shift? I mean, Rob, you brought up the Renaissance. And in fact, the Renaissance came right after the bubonic plague.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels. And the printing press is pretty comparable to what's happening with like social media and technology. So I think the parallels are really uncanny in terms of what's happening right now. And I think in learning, kind of going back to the Gutenberg printing press, it's what you talked about, Francis, is right now there's this hybrid learning, these new ways of learning. My kids are at home now doing remote school, and on Thursday they'll go in person, and then we are trying to compensate by doing like different types of learning ourselves as parents. So I think learning is just becoming part of everyday life, and whether it's digital, whether it's physical, I think these platforms for learning, and everyone's been on podcasts nonstop since COVID. So I think it's just these channels for learning are evolving so quickly, and the thirst and hunger for knowledge is pretty comparable to what happened in the Renaissance, and the kind of sharing between architecture and sculpture and science and art. So I love that multidisciplinary approach and just learning from these adjacent industries.
So another question, maybe Naomi, you talked about connections and building networks and when to ask, and has this platform enabled engagement that we may never have had before?
Yeah, I think COVID and also Black Lives Matter has like kind of just, it totally upended how I thought about social media. It totally changed how I engaged with different brands. And I think both events, both were happening simultaneously, and this feeling of change and revolution has made it feel like, well, you can just email whoever you want to email. Like it used to be like, it's intimidating. Should I give this person a call? But everyone's kind of in this like, I don't know what's happening boat. So why not give them the email? Send them a direct message on Instagram. And through these social media channels, you have these direct lines to people you may not have had a direct line to. Like an influencer, you DM them on Instagram and you're talking to the direct person. So there's a lot of cutting through of middlemen that I think is really a benefit of what's happening. And one other thing is that with all of these online platforms, like what Rob was saying with this access to information, is that it's increased access for so many different people. So not everyone has the means to have a wood shop, but you can sit down on Zoom and watch a seminar on something, or you can watch a demo on something. And maybe you don't get the full experience of the hands-on, but you can learn so many different things via this platform, and more people can be involved in it.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very spectacular time. We had a trustee emeritus who gave a gift to the institution so that everybody who was distance learning, remote learning, online learning, could get the entire kit for foundation to their house. And the students in fashion got a sewing machine and a dress form. Can you imagine getting this on your doorstep? I mean, I'm just like, it's remarkable. Because, and then of course, the learning can come through any device at this point, right? And then how do you work together? We're starting to see some extraordinary learning opportunities. And they're going to be, again, there will be some mistakes and we'll learn from them. One of the other great things that's happening is that the generations are now teaching each other, right? So it used to be you had this person here, but now we have faculty who are learning from students about the media, the very media that we're using, right? So I learn from people about how to use particular platforms where I would have been always the teacher. And I think that it's not really true. We did try to listen to our students all the time, but I think right now, the kind of learning that goes on is truly reciprocal, that people are bringing new tools, new technologies, new ways of engaging. When you think about, so I have a 22-year-old, he was born on the computer, right? So this is already, Gen Z fully engaged. This is the way they've been training for this all their lives. And so that's quite remarkable. We're going to wrap up in a few minutes, but other things that you've been thinking about that you'd like to share that somehow we didn't touch?
I just want to reinforce the community. It seems like it's the thread that kind of connects this conversation, but the community at Pratt, the creative communities you build as you go through your career, it's so important to really rely on those. Like Naomi had talked about mentoring, and Jeff talked about internships, and I just think those relationships are so important to cultivate. And I think my advice to everyone else out there that's Pratt or alumni is to really lean into that and use that in a meaningful way.
I'm going to bump off of what Rob said and just add, don't burn bridges, because you never know when something's going to cycle back. And not every relationship you have personally or through work is going to be the best, but you can leave it on a good term, because you never know when that person is someone you're going to need to call for a favor, or you're going to run into them for something, and something can happen through that. So just don't burn your bridges either.
Yeah, and I think combining what you guys both said, I think right now more than ever, like collaborating with other people, whether you're working on a project or helping somebody else on their project. I do have my ex-coworkers that like launching their brand too. We just like meet up once a month to just brainstorm about what they're doing, what I learned from my mistakes, how they can do better for their business. And I think just like doing that and keeping a discussion open with your network, whether you're working with them right now or you work with them, and not burning bridges is like one of them. But also like if somebody's leaving your team, to be open about it, knowing that they need to move on and be respectful of that. I think we always think about us leaving a place, but we don't think about people leaving our place. And I think it comes out like both ways. Yeah.
So let me ask a question. When you talk about people leaving your place, how many people do you actually work with? Who's in your orbit in terms of people who are employees or consultants? Or so, Jeff, let me ask you, how many people work with you, for you?
So I work with the accountant. Obviously, that's an important part of a business. I found my sales guy through Instagram. He DM'd me and be like, "Hey, like I like your brand. I would like to like do the wholesale for that." The people who do my campaign images and website, they're actually comedy majors from Pratt. They started their own studios. And with like I have the PR agency and other like different components of the business. But with COVID itself, having to reduce that budget, which I had to like let some people go on a pause, but they are aware that once, like things get back to normal, we all get back together. So it's just like keeping that open and being honest about what's going on in the business and the people you work with.
Naomi, how about you?
I have a lot of hats and I wear all of them. I do most of everything. I did recently do a collaboration with a graphic designer. I finally hired someone. And this is a little bit tangential, but I love doing trades. I love bartering goods because there's so much focus on money, money, money. And that's not the only thing that has value. So I love working with other creative people or people who are open to doing part money, part trade. I can make you a spoon if you make me a logo or something like that. Being open to different ways of sharing and exchanging products, goods, services. But really it's me. I work in a communal wood shop. So if there's ever something that I need a second set of hands for, I either just ask for it, or if I need to hire someone for the day, I hire someone for the day. And yeah, it's just me.
So Naomi and Jeff, you brought up this issue, one, the accountant. Naomi, you said, figure out how much you need to live and then work from there. And so how do you survive? How do you make sure that you do have enough income to live your life?
I think the answer to a small business is having different sources of income, which I mentioned before, like I do personal training on the side to bring some money to like live the life you want to live, right? Because with the small business, the amount that you invest and the time that you invest, you're reinvesting like season after season to keep it going and growing the business. I think having different sources of income, if you want to run a small business, that would be key.
How about you, Rob?
Well, I have been working with multiple clients, so I think it's in terms of like working with people or hiring people. I love leading creative teams, and I've always had such success in growing teams and having creative people to sort of share ideas and build things. So I try to do that in unique ways with some of the projects I'm working on or the people I collaborate with. Does that answer your question, or is that more towards the finance side?
Well, I think that's we're designers. We avoid those questions. Naomi, how about you? You've been able to make it work, obviously. so I think that the success is just showing I think your passion, all of you, for the work that you're doing is such a marker for the extraordinary lives you're leading. And I think that's wonderful. Jeff, I lived the same life. In order to survive, when I opened my architecture practice, I was teaching. And that was, Naomi, I'm going to guess that was part of your livelihood as well. But my partner, one of them had a Greek restaurant, and the other was an Olympic rower. So that everybody sort of had a way of building this together. I'm very interested in the training connected to the lunchbox. So there's something quite profound about that. I just want to, thank you all. And I know Rosemary is going to wrap us up. And thank you for this extraordinary conversation and engagement. I have you all on the hook, although really Jeff volunteered you all to think about shepherding somebody from the school. And you should know that we have this really extraordinary Career Center of Professional Development that actually we offer professional development to anybody who graduated from Pratt ever. So this is that very moment where people are thinking, what am I going to do? Because things have changed. They used to work for Jeff, and they're training instead someplace else. And the opportunity to come back and get advice, and really know that there's a community that supports you forever. It's a long time, forever. So again, thank you. And I know, Rosemary, you're going to jump in. Here you are. It's magic.
Thank you for having me back. I just want to say that was wonderful to be here with all of you. And Francis, thank you for moderating. Naomi, Jeff, and Rob, it was great to hear more from all three of you. And we look forward to being in touch. I hope that everybody who was able to tune in today to join us, that you stay tuned and follow at Pratt Alumni. On Instagram as we announce upcoming events. And don't forget to access other programming and events this week. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you. Nice to meet you all.